Now, FW De Klerk's comment last week that apartheid was not a crime against humanity continues to draw strong reaction. Institute for Healing of Memories founder Father Michael Lapsley has written an article in the Daily Maverick. He says apartheid was fundamentally evil and De Klerk must face that fact. As you well know, De Klerk and his foundation withdrew the remarks and apologized earlier today. Father Lapsley is in our Cape Town studio this afternoon. He joins us live. Thanks for your time, Father. De Klerk, of course, and his foundation withdrawing that statement. What's your response to it?
It's very interesting that De Klerk responded to pressure when he made his famous announcements on February the 2nd, 1990. And once again, he's responded to pressure. And I think most of the nation is saying, is this genuine? But as the expression goes, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. So is this going to be a turning point for the De Klerk Foundation? Is it going to be a turning point for FW De Klerk? I think the nation will be very interested to see, because for the last 25 years, De Klerk has been in denial about his own responsibility in the years of apartheid, but even in the years that he was president, even in the time after February the 2nd, when the regime began to negotiate, but continued to kill at night. So I think we wait to see what is going to happen before we can be convinced that there's a change. But I think there's another dimension, and that is the way we as South Africans have responded. I think it indicates that our pain is very close to the surface. Our national trauma is still very evident. So I think our reaction tells us something about where we are as a nation and the need for a new national conversation about how do we heal ourselves so we don't pass this trauma on from generation to generation.
Yeah, so the statement still doesn't take away from the fact that the former president, up until today, didn't feel that apartheid was a crime against humanity. It speaks volumes, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. And yet millions and millions of South Africans across generations know that apartheid was a crime against humanity. I always remember that famous line of Chief Lutuli that said apartheid insulted God for daring to create a human being and a black image. So that insult to God and to every human being in South Africa remains. And De Klerk has apologized, but even the pain and trauma that is caused in these days remains in the nation.
Yeah, so let's talk about racism overall and how we need to move on from this. You, of course, the founder of the Institute for Healing of Memories. As it stands, do you think we've gotten as far as we should in terms of healing as a nation?
Well, I think in a way the Truth and Reconciliation gave us a jump start. But however, it should have been the beginning of a national process that needed to happen in every town and village right across the country. And it didn't. And our democratic state failed in its requirement to prosecute those who didn't receive amnesty. So I think once again we need to look at our national trauma and face up to it. Of course, we haven't got as far as we needed to. It would be foolish to say that no steps have been taken. We created a democratic constitution. But I want to suggest to you that there's an interconnectedness between the political, the social and the economic, and the psychological, emotional and spiritual. And because we haven't transformed our society, we still have vast inequality that feeds into the pain and trauma which hasn't fully subsided.
Yeah, so very quickly, denial, of course, is clearly real in South Africa. How do we get past that? Is that even possible?
Well, I think that is probably an intergenerational journey, and this is where we had a great disservice from FW De Klerk, because if he'd been able to say apartheid was fundamentally evil and he had deep sorrow for being part of it and then dedicated his life to changing, then I think it would have helped the white community in particular out of its denial. But they set up a form of denial that enabled the leaders to denial and let the foot soldiers take the rap. where clearly those who sat in Parliament wearing suits actually carried greater responsibility. But I think it's important that we as a nation say we don't want to be prisoners of the past. We want to face it, acknowledge it, and yet deal with our own psychological, emotional and spiritual wounds. And that's true for South Africans of all races.
All right, thank you so much for your time. Father Michael Lapsley, founder of the Institute for Healing of Memories.